how many actual reflectors are here? I see a show of hands for reflectors. 1, 2, 3. 3? What the hell are the rest of you doing here? You're sick people. You have no other way to spend your money? You think this is going to help you understand reflectors?
It was a package deal.
Ah, that's what it was, right. Okay, I wondered why there were so many people there. I'm only going to talk to the reflectors. The rest of you can sort of listen in, sort of. I should put the three of you on display, right?
I feel really proud of you.
Yeah. You know, I talked yesterday about the fact that I'd sort of given projectors the shaft for many years because I put all my focus on generators. I did nothing for reflectors, really, other than the few opportunities I had to really, just be able to impart the wisdom of a cycle. You know, the cycle of the moon. You see, when I say that projectors are alien to me, they're alien, but I sort of get it, you know? But I realize intrinsically that reflectors are really odd, and they're odd in an extraordinary way. I mean, one of the things that fascinates me about the nature of the reflector is that my assumption is that it is some kind of genetic mutation. They're not like everybody else at all. And I think it's obvious from the moment that you see them, that is, the moment that you see their design. Because, in fact, when you're looking at their design, well, you're not looking at anything, are you? I mean, that's the thing that I find so fascinating about the reflector design. You know, you put up 95 reflector designs, and it's like, well, you know, all you see is these hanging gates in whiteness. But you have no life force to grab onto. See, I joke about us non-sacral beings being parasitic. But the reality is that if you're a manifester or a projector, you have an inherent life force at work. That's what a channel is. It's one of the most mysterious things in the knowledge. You know, you look at the inanimate object and it only has the potential of a hanging gate. The 25th gate. That's the inanimate object. Only the potential. You know, what the magician dreams of is being able to connect to the inanimate and bring a life force out of it. Frankenstein, you know? And then you look at a single cell. And the moment you look at the single cell, you see that, oh, there's a channel. That is the potential of a channel. And we go immediately from the inanimate to the life force. Now that's quite a difference. You know, on the obvious level, when we think about those things, it's very, 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 very obviously different. The rabbit and the rock. You can tell right away that one is inanimate and one has got the life force. You know? No rocket scientist necessary for this one, right? Inanimate, animate. And then I look at the reflector. Now, it's clear to me, obviously, that the reflector has this potential for the life force, obviously. But if I just try to deconstruct it, you know, if I try to stand back from it and look at it and see, why is this so different? It's because they are the only beings on this planet that take their life force from the totality. I mean, somebody once asked me, what would be my ideal design? Not somebody very clever, by the way, but what the hell? And my answer was, no activations at all. I mean, the real reflector, right? No activations at all. No hanging gates. Nada. One with the gods. Eh? The gods have a bad meal, I get gas. Immediate connection to the gods. Perfect. And when I think about the reflector that way, I begin to understand them. See, I try to teach mystically the way in which all of this is being organized into a single life. So much about what we do on this plane is so banal and locked in through the not-self homogenization. And that when you're looking at solar types, manifestor, generator, projector, we are dominated by the sun-earth in a way that is very, very difficult for us to challenge. It is our prime imprinting. And it actually unites all of us. See, one of the great jokes of a reflector is to talk about their purpose. I mean, it is. It is a great joke. Because in fact, the sun-earth is secondary to them. And will always be secondary. They're different. I mean, they're really different. You see, they are not driven by the life force. It is not the sun that fills them with life. It is the moon that drives them. They're different. You see, you cannot compare them. We talk about conditioning. It is one of the main themes of this knowledge. To understand when you're being conditioned by the other. To understand your openness. To understand what it brings in your life. But in fact, that only makes sense if you're talking about solar types. I mean, after all, what does conditioning mean to a reflector when there is no counterpoint? You see, if you're a projector and you only have two centers defined, and it looks like you're really, 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 really open, doesn't it? But you're not. You have this very fixed imprint. And that very fixed imprint gives you a counterpoint to the conditioning. It's what gives the conditioning its power as a reference to who you are, the challenge. The challenge in all of us solar beings to come to grips with who we are and to deny the power of conditioning to run our lives. But if you're a reflector, you're born to be conditioned. You're not born with a fixed imprint. You're not born with a fixed life force that gives you a fixed notion of where or what may be. Not at all. See, my connection to beings is through their auras. I can remember when I began my mystical process on the island, somebody gave me dowsing sticks. Dowsing sticks. These are copper rods that I would use to locate water and find things in the ground. And it was kind of cute. I have 3 open motors. I'm very sensitive to the environment around me. And I began to measure auras. I can remember, I think even a Locke would remember, in the very early days of my teaching, when I was still teaching people in my house, every once in a while at the break, I'd take them outside and measure their auras, and, just to see how big their auras were. It's when I discovered that my pets were dangerous. Dogs and cats have enormous auras, almost as big as ours. And it's like, wow, to begin to see in a way that you could see it. Because I could measure it. And it started this very, very long process for me of beginning to see that what I understand intellectually and teach you as type is simply a language for what the aura is. Because it's the aura that tells our story. It's the aura that does the talking. My manifestor aura is very specific. When I meet manifestors, it's so obvious. It's so specific, that aura. You can feel how tight it is. You step into a generator aura, it's so obvious. I mean, for me, You know, this enveloping power of their aura. The projector that zeroes in on you. But the reflector? We had a country home when I was growing up on a little lake in central Quebec. And it was one of these moraines. You know, it was the result of glaciation had moved away, and you had millions of little flat stones. And I can remember as a 6 or 7-year-old how much I loved to stand on the bank of that lake. And I would take those stones in my hand and I would slip them across the surface of the lake. And they would bounce like a UFO, you know. They would never really go into the water. It was fantastic to watch. The water is the reflector. And the stone is all of us. And it never, never, never gets in. It never, ever, ever really gets in. It doesn't. It just slides off. And you see, what we don't understand, that is those that are non-reflector, is that this quote-unquote Teflon aura is an absorbing aura. You slide off, but you do not slide off without being taken in. But you are taken in a way that has nothing to do with the normal way in which we understand conditioning. This process I've gone through over this week about signatures, looking to the other side of the negative theme. Perhaps the one most difficult to grasp is the theme of surprise. This signature of the reflector. What in fact does it actually mean? When I first began to describe the reflector, I described them as the canary in the coal mine. You know, this was the tradition in the coal mines in Wales. After all, mines, you can reach toxic gas pockets. And of course, miners have died from all of that. So they would take canaries in cages down into the mines with them. And the canaries have a very, very sensitive respiratory system. And if the canary drops dead, everybody had a couple of minutes to get out alive. Many, many canaries saved many human beings' lives. And this was my first description of the reflector, to begin to get a sense that they are in some ways guardians of humanity. You see, they do not have a true role. The world is for projectors and generators. It is not for anyone else. This is their world. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a place for the manifester or for the reflector. But it is not our world. I mean, it isn't. It is up to generators and projectors where this planet will go, where consciousness will go. But I've learned something about the mystical process. You need signposts. You know? Weathermen. You know, the people who stand by the roadside and say, yes, you're going in the right direction. You need signposts. See, reflectors are that signpost. And their dilemma with conditioning is that they are designed to process the homogenized world. They have to. They're not here to process abnormality. They're here to process the homogenized world like a radar machine. Have you ever seen these pictures, from movies, where they're tracking an object and you have this screen and there's a sort of a glowing line that goes around the screen, and every time it makes a full circle around the screen, there's another blip. These radar screens. Well, this is a reflector. They process, like radar, the environment around them. And that blip is the cycle of the moon. And every time they go around in their process, radaring the sky, if you will, radaring the human environment, what they're looking for is the blip They're looking for something different. They're measuring the level of the consciousness field relative to the homogenized programming. You see, if a reflector is not awake, they are a servant of Big Brother. You see, I guarantee you that most of the reflectors who are part of, let's say, our Western culture, that so many of those reflectors are deeply, deeply conservative. I think it's very rare to find a radical, very rare to find a radical reflector, because that's not their job. You see, their job is to measure how well human beings are fucked up by the homogenized field. That's their job. This is what they can feel, because after all, I mean, it's why I asked Darmen, who's a reflector, as you all know, to do the neutrino forecast. Because the neutrino forecast is what reflectors are all about. You see, they take in the homogenized program in a way nobody else does. And they don't take it in to be homogenized themselves. They take it in to be able to recognize the resonance with the world around them. And if the resonance isn't there, they look and they see the problem. They're not fitting in to the homogenized environment. See, they have an incredible ability to spy those who are ready to break out. See, they can really save a life like the canary in the mine. Eh? But oh boy, are they deeply, deeply messed up when they're kids. There is this magical capacity in them, but you can see how easily, under the conditioning of the world that we live in, how they are not those that are looking for that break in the homogenized field as something to reward and something to raise up, like me looking at the crowd and saying, whose head do I cut off? That they can save everybody a lot of time and trouble by looking at the crowd and going, that one. But you see, if they're not correct, if they have not been educated, if they do not know that they are a lunar being, if they do not live that out, when they point their finger at that one is going to be taken away. That one is going to be punished. That one is going to be fired. That one is going to be killed. See, the not self can be really something. The moon is a cold, harsh mistress. This is not the warmth of the sun. You know, I honor the huntress goddess. You don't look her in the eye. She kills you. To be driven by the moon is very different than to be driven by the sun and in the earth. See, this is a very different creature. And they are not in any way committed to humanity. Understand that. They have a different allegiance entirely. You see, the program is more than just the Maya and the illusion that we live in. It's a vast thing. And there are different employees, quote unquote, of that program. Reflectors, eternally, as long as there has been beings endowed with consciousness in forms like us, reflectors have always been the ones who have been trained and conditioned to hold everybody to the line. They're really good at that. Very, very powerful in that. There's not a lot of them, eh? But there is a lot of them. It's always the joke with numbers and percentages. You know, we look at the reflector, we see, 1%. You know, that's nothing. It's 70 million people. It's 70 million people who were born disappointed. You have no idea what that means. To come out of the womb and you're already disappointed. You know? You see, if the reflector doesn't wake up, they can never escape that. I mean, never, never, never get out of that. Never. Never. See, they want desperately, deep within them, to be able to fulfill their purpose. And their purpose is to be a signpost. You know that wonderful Michelangelo Sistine Chapel finger of God? You know? This is the reflector. They are an aspect of the finger of God. That's what they're here for. But they tend to be the finger of control, the finger of homogenization, the finger of... And you cannot blame them. They are dependent on the life force that they are a part of. They don't want any problems. They don't. And you see, the not-self reflector is designed to be so uncomfortable with instability, so uncomfortable with those that break the mold, that break the pattern. And they're the only ones that can tell. They take the program in. They live in the community of not-self that lives out the program. And anyone who shows signs of dysfunction, which means trying to break away from the normality and become abnormal, is immediately seen. That one. See, I'm somebody who really knows the dark side. I mean, I know the dark side in the way that nobody else does because I have a lot of light. So I get to see very dark things. The darkest thing I know as a construct in human design is the reflector. It's the darkest force we have, is not self. And yet at the same time, the program cannot afford to give them up. This is the tragedy. See, the program needs the not-self reflector. Who do you think keeps the boys in line that they go on Friday to the mosque? You know? They are organizers of the program. I mean, every time I have a reflector in my life, and this is the first time I've ever discussed this, I always say a kind of silent, private thank you. You know, that there's at least some of them. Not many. Not many. You know, the fractal of reflectors that will be able to help us find those that are ready. You know, this wonderful movie, The Matrix. You know, this ability to be able to recognize somebody that you can pull out of the illusion. Not waste your energy on all those beings that you can't pull out of the illusion. You can't. You can't. Yeah, it's a lunar day. You can't. But you see the correct reflector, the awake reflector. They are truly the ones that can see the roses in the garbage dump. They're the ones that can tell right away who's going to be ready to break the covenant. They can see it. And we need that. This ability to be able to see who's ready, who's waiting. See, my concern about the reflector is that I deeply understand what their role is in maintaining this homogenized world, and I am its enemy. You know, the deepest forces that hold people from abnormality are rooted in the power of the reflector. They have an amazing place in our lives. They do. And for me, the not-self reflector is much more powerful and much more dangerous than the not-self anything else. Because they hold those that could be saved. They hold them in the thrall of the program. It's what they do. You see, when I look at mythology, my own kind of mythology, looking at the roles of type, looking at what's there, I see so clearly the challenges on either side. You know? They seem, they tell you so much about what's necessary. It's like the generator having to know itself. What that really means, to know yourself. I mean, how profound a process that is. And how absolutely essential it is in order for the generator to be able to function correctly. When I look at the reflector, and I see that everything about them is simply about being able to be surprised. And be surprised ultimately in the most positive sense. How do they get there? I mean, I've tried. I'm grateful for the reflectors I have in my life, but you know, there are many, many more reflectors that I have given readings to that have not hung around in human design, at least not as far as I know. I don't think there's any greater challenge than to awaken a reflector. First of all, let's think about something. The moon. You know, nothing would exist on this planet without the moon. We forget that. You know, I'm Ra, I'm a sun worshiper. You know, I think the sun's holy. Fill my body with warmth. Bring all those wonderful things out of the ground. Give life to the world. But if you forget about the moon, you're a fool. Because if you take the moon away, it all goes away. It all dies. It's all over. We're all in the thrall of that moon. It's not just the seas that rise and fall. The very liquid in our cells is moved by the waves. We are all very much in the hands of the moon. But only reflectors are locked to that cycle. Locked to it. Like that radar grid going around. This is how they measure every lunar cycle, the 28, 29-day cycle. This is how they measure, like that radar, waiting for a new blip to show up, if there is one. I guess if you really want to understand their dilemma, it begins with their open G center. Because you see, their radar is very specific. You know, they need the consistency of an environment that they can keep on scanning. This is their role, scanning the community, constantly waiting for the blips. Their open G is really their core. It is. It is the community that is so important to them because this is where they have their responsibility to the program. They are servants of the program. And I don't mean that in any negative sense. Please understand, the program is only bad if you're trying to be abnormal and wake up. Otherwise, the program's delicious. It is the large, fucked up, normal life that everybody lives. And, they're all doing their thing out there. It's crucifixion day, after all. Hey, I made 2 babies on crucifixion day. It's one of my favorite days. I love Good Friday. Anyway, think about what it's like to be a reflector child. Think about the 70 million reflector children and how many of them are born in places that you wouldn't want to be born in environments that you would never want to live in. Think about the influences that are there around them. And you see, when a parent has a reflector child, they really don't know what the hell to do. They don't get it. It's very, very difficult to get it. What is this thing? I mean, you have a generator child and you can feel it. You feel it so much it drives you crazy, right? You got a manifestor child and you're buying leashes and chains. You know it. You have a projector child and you wonder if they'll ever be alive, but you know it. And then you have a reflector child and you think, were the babies switched at the hospital or something? Where did this one come from? And what does it do? Oh, because you never get to them. Imagine being a generator mother and you've got a reflector child. And there's your aura, a stone skimming off that lake. Endlessly skimming off that lake. And you see, the reflector doesn't care about you. The reflector baby is the only baby that thinks that a mother is simply an aspect of all mothers. Imagine. Reflectors have truly I don't know awake reflectors. The awakened reflector literally has no personal connection. It can't be personal. The other is just an aspect of an archetype of a thing. This is not my mother. This is an aspect of the mother. And I didn't get a great aspect, It's not personal. And then they meet their father. Frightening for a reflector, This aspect of it. This is the male thing. Nothing's personal. And so you have the parent that goo goo gaga, you're my baby. And the baby will play certain conditioned roles. This is a baby after all. It needs to be nourished, whatever. But you don't feel that, gee, you're my mama? No, that's not there. It isn't. Not only that, they never stop measuring on their radar screen. See, with a reflector, you meet a reflector, you got a 28-day grace period. That's it. Because when they get into the second cycle, hey, I mean, my idea of being able to demonstrate what a reflector is to take a reflector and film them 24 hours a day for one cycle of the moon, and then compress it at high speed. This kind of film where you see a city street at, zzz, and you see the compression of the cycle for the reflector. See, this is their cycle. I mean, it is literally the only way in which they can operate correctly. And you see, your relationship to a reflector in that first 28 days means absolutely nothing. First of all, it's not personal for them. It's not. It isn't. For a reflector looking at me, I'm just another aspect of teacher. You know? And they can feel all of that. Because, of course, they take in their Teflon sampling. And, of course, everything in this world says, no, we're sun people, you got to be warm and cuddly and cozy and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And you got to do things like this, and, you know, it goes on and on and on. You got to make up your mind in the moment and this and that. And then you see what happens to them. They become the enforcers of the program. You know? Big braids on their shoulders. The program is the only way. And are they ever good at pointing out those that will challenge it? It's what scares me about reflectors. And I'm so aware of the fact that we will never really get to them. I mean, the only reflectors that we're ever going to have a chance with are the very few that have powerful fractal lines and the baby reflectors that are raised by aware parents. Because it's an extraordinary gift. I want you to grasp that gift. You see, this is hierarchical knowledge. It is not for everyone. You know, I will not go up on a cross. This is not what it's about. This knowledge is elitist. You know, it's useful for about 0.4% of the world, which is about the same percentage as it's always been. And in order to find those beings out there, you know, the one out of several hundred that's ready, you won't find them without aware reflectors. It's their job. See, I watched my generation kill themselves with unstructured shaman paths. I'm one of them, and I survived. But you see, there was nobody to come into my household when I was a boy and to say, give me this one. This one is different. You give me this one, I will train this one. That's what they used to do. You know, and then I would have had good training. And instead I had to watch friends die on acid trips and people go mad on drugs that they should never have taken and didn't know how to take, and on and on and on. There was no one. We lost that. Those of us, the modern ones, the so-called civilized Western society ones, we didn't have our shaman anymore. We didn't have anyone to point the finger and say, this one, give me this one. So its life is not wasted. That its difference does not become the pain that it has to suffer through in its life. There was nobody there. It is not my job to recognize that. It isn't. It isn't. I'm a messenger. I just deliver a message. I don't care about who hears it. But you see, the reflector, they can actually tell who can hear it. They're the ones, they are the greatest recruiters we have. Because it will become more and more difficult. See, we're already on a cusp of this knowledge where it is becoming very generalized in the sense of its market. There are so many people now that are interested in human design who will never live out this fractal. Never. Never. I mean, just because, you know, a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend gets you to look at something, doesn't mean it's for you. The fact that you may find it interesting or attractive doesn't mean you're going to live out your design. It doesn't. It doesn't. This is not about what you want. This is about what you get. And you see the ability to be able to find those. They're there. They're out there. And it's not that they're out there in some new agey place and just doing the wrong thing. They're caught in the conservative grind. They're caught in the ordinary life. They're caught in institutional, mindless, not self, day-to-day, mundane world. This is where you find them. You find them in the deepest, deepest holes in this not self world of ours. And they're not missionaries. That's not what reflectors are about. They're not. They're spotlight people. You ever notice that? I mean, I live in this paradise. When you watch the sunrise, I wake up facing east, and I'm an Aryan, so I'm an early riser. I watch the sunrise every day. And when the sun breaks over the hills, there is this huge spreading of light. It is absolutely incredible. But I've also sat on a rock in the middle of the Mediterranean, in the middle of the night, and watch the moon rise and have it put its spotlight right on my body. You see, the reflector, they're spotlight people. They're able to highlight that blip in a homogenized field that nobody else could see. I mean, think about radar for a moment, because it's a fantastic metaphor. I mean, it literally was the thing that resolved, in a sense, who was going to win the Second World War. It was radar. You were able to see things that nobody else could see. Not only could you see them, you could see where they were going. You could see where they were coming from. And nobody else could see them. You see, the reflector that can look out at the homogenized field of cows and sheep can see the wolf. And they can ignore the rest. And that's not what we get from them. It isn't. It isn't. You see, when there are forces that will align against me, this knowledge, they will be spearheaded by reflectors. I like to keep my enemies close to me, to know them better. Because, oh boy, do I understand. It's their job to stop abnormality. It's their job to hold the homogenized field together. It's their job. They are serving greater forces than the rest of us. I understand. But I want a few of them, okay? Just a few of them. So we have some on our side. Who can be in competition with the dark side. The dark side says, there they are, kill them. And the good side says, there they are, let's pull them out and make them abnormal. And I'm not kidding for a moment, I mean, not for a moment. It's precisely what they are about. And you must be careful. I mean, I'm aware of that. It's a nice thing about being a manifester is you can inform when you want to. There are so many things that I know about type and how these beings are intended to work, the way in which all of this goes along. I hoped for years that if I soft-pedaled what reflectors were and just concentrated on their lunar cycle, that I would manage to corral some of them, and somewhere down the line, I could sort of let them know, which is what I'm doing today. Because I have discovered that I didn't do a very good job. I didn't get a lot of them. They're very difficult to gain access to. You see, they're beyond non-energy type. You know, they are linked to something that transcends that. You see, when I say that they are servants of the program, they are servants of the greater life. You know, us down here, us solar types, you know, we're sort of, you know, they're watching over us the way a kindergarten teacher watches over the kiddies, you know, making sure that we all stay in line. I mean, that's who they are. And because of the way in which they are raised, the way they're conditioned, it's so difficult to get to them. And then you have the dilemma. The same dilemma I faced with projectors, which was why I was so concerned about them, is that you don't get this energy type, instant gratification, blah, blah, blah. I knew how long it was going to take projectors. But you know, when you say to somebody 7 years and they're looking ahead, geez, it's not like, wow, this is exciting, I'm just going to jump on board right now, you know? I mean, it isn't. You know, and then if I tell the reflector, look, you're the enemy and I'm trying to, what do they do then when they pull the enemy over to your side? You know? I don't know what the term is, I can't find it there. No. There's a... You turn them, right, exactly. I'm trying to turn these reflectors into being tools of abnormal awakening. What a trip. A number of years ago, I was in Cologne, in Germany. And I was staying at a couple's flat in town. And they had a little reflector boy, and he was 6 years old, and he was in some kind of a daycare program. And she was asking me, obviously, questions about how to raise a reflector, and I was telling her about, you know, the decision-making process for the child, not to push the child, and give the child as much time as possible, a month, this kind of thing, you know, to try to get her to work the cycle with the child. And then she starts telling me a story. The kids were, the parents had been invited to one of these, you know, events that the teachers organize, that the kids do things and whatever. And one of the things the kids were doing is that they were doing this game, you know, where the music plays, musical chairs, where you go around, the music stops, and you pull the chair out and stuff like that. And all the kids were being lined up around chairs, and her son was sitting off in the corner. And, of course, the teacher's also under pressure because she's got all these parents there and wants everybody involved and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So she goes over to the little boy and she says to the little boy, she said, where would you like to sit? He said, in the middle. So while all the other kids played musical chairs, he sat in the middle of the circle and watched. And, you know, it was such a classic reflector image, eh? I mean, just classic. You know, this is who they are. You know, they don't need, it's not their personal place that ever matters. They are the most impersonal of all creatures. And of course, it makes it very difficult because of the demands of this life to be personal, to be a lover, to be a parent, to be a child, to be all of these things. And they are so impersonal and it's misunderstood. I mean, after all, they're like me, they're all unemotional. We can be cool, icy, hard-ass people. I know, I live it. You know, and when you're a reflector on top of that, and you are basically impersonal, where humanity is sort of, you know, your second cousin. You know, it's like, all right, I got to look after them, and you know, these idiots that never stay in line. And how difficult it is to accept that as a parent, that you raise a child impersonally. You know, the best thing to do with a reflector child is the moment you can, get them out of the house. You know, put them into childcare, daycare, people care, dog care, cat care, any kind of care. Put them out in the world, put them out in their community. They have to be totally absorbed in that. It's how they begin to feel their world. It's the only way that they're going to begin to recognize who they are. And you see, they can only be comfortable with who they are when their environment is stable. When everybody plays by the rules, whatever the rules of that community, that culture, whatever the case may be. And they are so deeply upset when the rules are broken. You know? And it's not personal. Yes, you can execute them. It's not personal. Not at all. It's just, well, they're a problem. And we don't need problems, do we? I mean, we don't need people thinking that they know, do we? We certainly don't need people thinking they are their own authority now, do we? The program is the authority. All hail the program. See, when I say that they're the enemy, they're the ones that keep everybody else locked into the not-self. Think about it. This little slice, the driving force, keep everybody in line. There has never, ever, ever been an attempt of any kind to wake up reflectors. Nobody. You check all the literature. You know, you can read in ancient literature a grasping of generators and manifestors and projectors. You can actually see and smell it. They don't have the same language, obviously. But there is nothing anywhere about the reflector. It's only now. I mean, this is why we live in such a time that is so extraordinary. Because it is now that on the fractal line there are those, regardless of their type, that there is the opportunity to step out of the program. You see, when I break my covenant with the program, it's not a big deal. Not to the program. You know, the program says, hey, he wasn't good in here anyway, let him do his thing, you know. He's not going to take everybody away. We're not going to lose the main drift of things. It's okay. But the fact that he's recruiting reflectors, this is a problem. You know? This we don't like at all. We don't have that many to give away. We need them. The 7 billion that need to be controlled on the reins of reflectors. It's really something to grasp. And you see, I love it. Because every time it's possible that a reflector is so lucky that they can enter into a process of being correct. This is the most classic breaking of the covenant that one can imagine. You see, it doesn't matter to me that the program this time, this incarnation, after all, I know that you are crystals of consciousness and not bodies. that the bodies are the medium for the trip, and it is the medium of the trip that defines your type. I mean, I understand. But you see, the personality, it has a right to awaken. It doesn't matter what your body is. It has a right to awaken. That though there are few reflectors that will ever awaken, it is their right to awaken. It is. But for them, like it is to enter into a reflector process, to accept the fact that decision-making can be such an arduous process, to accept all the things that come with being a reflector. This is no easy task. And it's not like the projector that can actually have a trajectory of knowledge and accomplishment. I mean, for the reflector, knowledge is simply a matter of grasping the lunar cycle, being able to understand one's own radar system, to understand the program, because that's their business. But most of it is not that. You see, it's beginning to get to their uniqueness. And their uniqueness is there. It doesn't matter that they're open. You can see it in the colors, in the tone, in the bass. You can see it in the deep complexity of the way in which they are configured, that the uniqueness is there. And it has to emerge. See, the teaching that I gave to reflectors when I began, like any teaching I gave when I began, carried with it the one essential truth that makes a difference. When the reflector is committed to not making decisions other than on their lunar cycle, then they gain that one opportunity to be able to live out their unique authority, regardless of the overriding role that the program has imposed on them. And you see, when they break the covenant with the program, this is something very special. You know, this is when the news goes out on the crystal fractal line. Hey, he got a reflector. You know? That's like having a lawyer go to heaven. You know, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. We got another one. The man got a reflector. Can you believe that? And of course, on the other side, they're saying, that son of a bitch sold out. I mean, how does a reflector do that? How do they turn their back on us? You know, I mean, reflectors can be so deeply punished for that. I mean, deeply. They have a very, very extraordinary role. And it's such a deep process to get them to a place where they can live that out. And nobody can help. You know, I would love to be able to say, here's the way to do it. Give you a list. You know, we all have to go through our own process. It's the only way that it works. And you have to be deeply, deeply dedicated as a reflector. Because there is no other way. And it's very, very lonely. There is no other way. And it takes a lot of time. I mean, a lot of time. They work on a different calendar. You know? It's a different life for them. And it's their own. And the moment that they are really clean, that is clean in the sense that they truly are aligning their geometry through their authority, that's when they begin to be of service. They're here to be of service. This is the role. And the service is their gift. That they can recognize those that are ready to break the covenant. This is the great surprise, you know? to awaken in someone who doesn't even know that they're there and they're ready to have somebody who sees it, who takes them out of the madness of the world and opens up the possibility of what life can be for them. That's the Reflector's gift. Now that I've released this delightful bombshell, and all of you are going to look deeply suspiciously at any of the reflectors that you know in your life, it was very cute for me to just walk outside at the break and everybody was giving me their reflector boss stories, you know? The controlling reflectors in their lives, you know, all of that stuff. Just like that, you know. Their reputation was changed overnight. Overnight, you know, everybody used to ignore them. Now it's like, is there a reflector in the room? And, you know, are they watching? You know, this is the great cosmic CIA. I mean, after all, you know, so I'm glad that I have been able to raise the image of the frequency of reflector. I've made up for years and years and years of not telling them the truth. They'll probably hold it against me at some point, but nonetheless, what to do? I think it's time that it's why I'm doing this today. I've been thinking about this for over a year now. You know, to actually change the approach that I've had. I changed my approach to projectors a number of years ago because I realized that it was unproductive. And my approach to reflectors has been unproductive. It has not been successful. Not telling them what they really are. And, you know, I thought that I could sort of sneak them in. And it didn't work. So the program made some points on that one, so we tried this way. I think it's very important to understand who they are. I think there may be a chance that it's more likely that you can turn a reflector to itself by confronting it with what has happened to it and what it's actually doing. I think for reflectors, not self-reflectors, need to understand what kind of role they're playing in the lives of the people around them. To understand that there is a deep negative connected to that. Because you see, when you're talking about the reflector, you cannot talk about the not-self. In the same way that you cannot talk about conditioning in the reflector, in the same way you talk about conditioning in anybody else. I mean, it's not a personal not-self that they have. It's a community not-self that they have. You know, they integrate all of these aspects impersonally. This cycle, it's the only place you can begin. It was when I was given the knowledge and I was explained how all of these things work. It was the one that I thought would be the absolutely most difficult to implement. You know, I could already see the dilemma of the projector that wouldn't be able to get instant gratification. But when I looked at the reflector and I thought, I mean, what am I going to say to these people? You know, you make a decision once a month, you know. I mean, it's like telling somebody to wait that Jesus is going to show up in the morning. I mean, why do you do that with somebody? It's insane. You know, look, you just wait a month and everything will be, you know. But it's so powerful. I mean, that's the thing that's so incredible. You see, they are a programmed life. They're a programmed life. Like my little story about having no activations and being totally one with the program. This is their life. Their life isn't you, their mother, their lover, their friend, their brother. They have all of that and more. They have the program. I mean, one of the things that makes the not-self-reflector so dangerous is that They are the enforcers of most of the religions on the planet. Because they know in themselves that they are connected to something grand. You know? They are the pure servants of the program, and in the culture or civilization they belong to, that becomes translated into relative spirituality. I am a pillar of God's righteousness on this planet. I bow down and serve. See, they are one with the program. I mean, they are one with the consciousness field. Nobody else is. Yeah, they have their little unique take on it. But this is what they're about. And the only thing that gives them an opportunity to differentiate from another reflector is the circumstance of their geometry. I mean, think about what that means for a reflector to make a decision. You know, I mean, I try to deal as correctly as I can with reflectors in my life. If there's something that I'm interested in terms of my relationship with them, I will set it up and wait. You know, because I know that they have to go through this process. But you see, that moment of me and the reflector together is a moment in time and space. It is a movement, and it is a movement in which, as we fly in space, we meet each other in that moment. I mean, that's all it is. And then the reflector has to go through this journey. It's a journey. See, we think of time in an odd way. You know, morning to night. I think of time as movement. It's always movement. You see, for me, the reflector waiting out the cycle of the moon is like the emotional person waiting out their wave. There is all this information that is building in order to get to that place of clarity. And the thing to grasp about the reflector is that only in that geometry of the moment, it's that moment that establishes their unique potential. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. A reflector in a vacuum is dead. There is no life. They're not born for caves. They're here to interact with their community. And you see, the moment that something is presented to a reflector is actually a moment in time. It is a movement. It is a place that is unique. It is basic physics. No two objects can occupy the same place at the same time. And it's the unique start of that process that's their magic. It is the only thing that differentiates them. Nothing else. You see, decision-making for all of us is the holy grail of correctness. It is what we all seek, to make decisions correctly so that we can emerge as ourselves under our unique authority's guidance. That unique authority for the reflector can only emerge out of those moments of initiation, and it's those moments of initiation that establish a unique movement and reference point. From that point, you wait the cycle. From that point, no other point. It's what makes them different. You see, when I began to work with trying to educate the various types to their nature, when I dealt with reflector, and again, reflector, you know, I would do a 60-minute introduction and they'd get 5 minutes. You know, I do classes on type and they'd get a few minutes at the end, you know. And all I would put in there, all I could put in there for them was understanding this cycle. But it's everything. You see, it's the only way that they can begin to separate themselves from the program itself. It is the beginning of breaking the covenant, as it is for any of us who begin to make decisions correctly. Any of us. The difference is where I caution a projector that the other is the most important thing that they're ever going to have to think about, because it's the other that makes all the difference in their life. That a reflector can be surrounded by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and it won't make a goddamn difference to their process. They don't have to worry about the other while they're going through their lunar cycle. It's all Teflon. But only when they are on that unique decision-making track do they define their own direction in this life. And because they are the quintessential open G, this direction is everything for them. Everything. You see, the way the program has designed the reflector, if I can put it that way, it's kind of odd, is that the reflector is able to recognize anomalies as they emerge in their community. I mean, that's what they're for. See, a reflector in this environment is not functional, because everybody is trying to be abnormal. It's a kind of a reverse game here, you know? Here, it's a good time for them to be able to say, hey, there's somebody here who's trying to be normal. Let's get them out. You know, I see these normal people not living their design. Let's get them out. You know what I mean? The other side. This is not where they belong. They belong in the world of the dense not self. You see, the moment reflectors are surrounding themselves by those that are abnormal is the moment that they lose their value. They do. See, the world is filled with all kinds of human beings who have never had a chance. Eh? There was never that shaman who walked in the door and said, give me this one because he's going to be... This is what we need. Because they're all out there, they're just waiting. Nobody can see them. Nobody's got the radar for it except the reflector. We're the only ones that can sense it. And they can't get to that place until they are absolutely correct in the way in which they move. And you can tell that they are the deepest non-energy type because it takes them a month to get their engine going, if I could put it that way. You know, it's a slow build-up process relative to us that are fast. But all of this is for the perfect alignment of their movement in space. Oh, what that means, to be in the right place. See, this is what correctness is about. See, when you honor your strategy and authority, what you get is that your vehicle, being guided by the vehicular intelligence, that the vehicle aligns you to your geometry. It just does. Your personality may not see where you've been taken, but you are in the right place. You are in the right movement. And it's only in that movement, in that correctness, that you end up where you belong. And for a reflector, because they are such a tiny slice, that they need to be distributed throughout the planet. They do. They're all over the place. Every 200 people or something like that, every 100 people is a reflector. You know. And for the reflector to be in the right place is everything. Everything. And they can only get there through that decision-making process. And then you enter into all of the social dilemmas of being a projector. When I talk about somebody who is, let's say, an emotional generator, you know, when I talk about the process of waiting and pushing people away and on and on and on, you know, all that. And how difficult it is for them to come to grips with, you know, having to reject somebody who's coming to them when they like them and this kind of stuff. But think about the pressure that is there for a reflector. You know, when you've got somebody that calls them up and says, hey, I would really like to do this with you, and what do you think? Well, call me next month. No, but the thing's next week. Yeah, well, I'm going to miss it. It's not necessarily a comfortable thing to deal with the other in that way. I love you. I want to be with you. Yeah, talk to me next month. Let me check it out. I put it on my radar screen and see if that's all okay. We don't get that. The Brahmins, the Hindu Brahmins, they really got it, eh? They're moon freaks. Eh? I mean, if the Arabs were star freaks and the Babylonians were planet freaks, the Brahmins, they were moon freaks. The moon was everything for them. The phases of the moon, they have all of these things, blah, blah, blah. I'm supposed to be wise, by the way, because I'm in the last phase of the moon. They have all this stuff. They knew. More than that, they understood something very specific. For me, one of the deepest things that I've learned from the East is to understand the importance of the nodes of the moon. Because after all, the nodes are a trajectory of the moon. You cannot separate the moon from the nodes. And as we know, the nodes are about seeing, they're about movement, they're about our line, our geometry in this life. You see, reflectors are the eyes of the world. It's what they are. They are the ones that can see the whole thing. They're not good at trees, they're great at forests. And they can tell right away when something's wrong in the forest. This is what they are. I mean, when you look at it from its exalted perspective, it's a delight. But you see, because the dilemma is so difficult, what parent says to their reflector child, clean up your room, and the child says, ask me next month. You're going to get beaten with a stick, What do you mean, wait until next month? Well, I don't know if I really want to clean up my room. Yeah, but if we wait until next month, it's going to be pretty bad in there. Well, it doesn't work that way. The horror of when you're 5 or 6 years old and your family decides to abandon you and send you to an institution. They call it kindergartens or daycares or whatever the hell it is. Oh, if you're a generator, it's one thing, right? Developing aura, okay. If you're a projector, you have a chance to focus on some different people. It could be okay. If you're a manifestor, you hate it. Because they have leashes there, too. But the reflector child, that child being taken into that place and not being asked and not given the time to assess it. See, if you have a reflector child and you want to take that child to a school, you take that child to the school for a couple of days. Only a couple of days. You let them taste it. And then you take them out and you wait a month. And then you ask them, would you like to go to that school? What parent is ready to do that? They don't know any better. It's not like it's their fault. But when you think about what it is to raise a reflector, what kind of awareness is necessary. I mean, I joked before about my reflector recruiting process. The truth is, I know that the best shot we have with reflectors are reflector babies with aware parents who will finally give them the respect they deserve, and so they should. I mean, now that you understand what they're here for, you can understand that it's a beautiful thing to raise one correctly. It really is. And to recognize how difficult it is for the unaware parent to raise their reflector child. They don't get it. They don't know how to work at that level. They don't even know what it means. They don't. They can't reach it. I mean, I thought it was difficult for my mother to have a manifestor son. Because this is such a difficult aura. But to have a reflector child sliding off you, and all you want to do is hold on to them, and you cannot. You know, the psychological relationship of the parent to its reflector child is one full of dilemmas. Because nobody's taught them. They don't understand. Again, this is not about blame. It's about ignorance. But you see, I'm beginning to understand many things about the times we are in. This end of the time of the cross of planning. Our educational system. I mean, tomorrow and Sunday, I'm going to be looking at the two kinds of minds that we have. Perhaps one of the most important things that's emerged out of studies in human design. The difference between the left and the right-minded. We are dealing in a time in which there's enormous changes that must take place in the way in which we educate our young. And that means that is not something, because this is not messianic, it is not something where you can wait for this to become institutionalized. It will not be institutionalized. The cross of planning is coming to an end. This is about parents understanding how to raise their children. About people understanding how to help parents guide their children to their correctness. The education and raising of a reflector is something totally, totally different. Totally different. See, a reflector needs to grasp one thing at a time. Think about that. It's a 30-day process or whatever. I'm just rounding off the numbers. One thing at a time. This is how they master anything. It's why the beauty of that decision and its timetable. One thing at a time. And you see, they are able to process one thing in a way that nobody else can. They process it through this enormous movement in space. We travel at 425,000 kilometers an hour in space. Think about that. That's our relative speed moving around the galaxy. 425,000 kilometers an hour, and it takes them 30 days. You know how far we've moved? I mean, you cannot even imagine that distance. Millions and millions and millions of kilometers in space. And that movement in space is all new information pouring through. And as they move through their process, they are guided by the moon. They're guided by the moon. Any reflector that wants to have a Bible should look at the ancient writings on lunar phases. It's profound. It is something to grasp. Each movement of the moon is unique and special because it too takes place in a different time and space. And for the reflector, it is the moon and the way it filters the neutrino stream that defines it. Each phase carries its own formula for grasping. No one is deeper. No one can assess an environment more profoundly than a reflector. Nobody can deal with a decision with greater depth than a reflector. But the time, you have to take the time. See, in the decision-making sense, generators have the slowest life. And reflectors have the fastest life. You know? I mean, a reflector gets to make a decision every lunar cycle. By the way, whether they notice that or not, I mean, they're on an endless cycle. And it compresses their life. It does. You know, what it takes me a millisecond to decide takes them nearly 30 days. We live in a different world. See, I've always been aware of the fact that I'm a very superficial being. I am. I'm a splenic ego manifester. I'm right here on the surface. Everything about this life for me is the surface. The depth you assume I have is only my outer authority. It's just the thing that comes out of my mouth when I open it. But in fact, I have no access to it. I cannot sit alone and muse. I don't. I don't even think. I'm not a thinker. I don't ponder. Just a frequency in the moment. That's superficial. You know? I mean, I don't mind being the stone glancing off the side of the reflector. I sort of like being that stone. But the reflector, the depth of that. Not only the depth, you see, we think if you take somebody who's emotional and you say, yes, they got depth in terms of going through their wave, but it's always the same them. I mean, it's always the same definition. It's always the same person. It's always the same activation. Not the reflector. Not at all. It's the moon. To watch the moon as it clicks those gates. Hey, wow. It's just the moon. My most profound experience after the voice. I didn't know what to make of all of this. And I had to see for myself whether I was just absolutely crazy or not. So, in a very crude way, I devised a lunar ephemeris so I could watch the moon affect my own design. And I'm open emotionally. And it was in January. And in January and February, there were all these perfect placements of the planets. The moon, the sun, and Mercury were all about to go through gates that were either going to activate my solar plex system. I think there were 5 different possibilities for activating my solar plex. And the first one that I watched hit was the moon. I'm a 49th gate. That's the only gate I have in the solar plex. Unconscious. The moon went into the 19th gate. It's one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. I could feel it. I mean, I could actually feel it. I could feel the channel opening up. I could feel my emotions. I could feel my sister, who was in 1949. And I hadn't thought about her in a decade. And suddenly I could feel her in my body. I was stunned. You know, I was a nihilist. I mean, I wasn't somebody that was some kind of new age, whatever. I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe that this object, this cold, dead thing in the sky, was making me feel so emotional. It was absolutely extraordinary. It was the beginning of my journey of understanding that the body graph was more than a body graph. It was a portal to the gods. I mean, I learned how to meet all of them. I mean, I have a real relationship with the planets. I mean, it's real. They program me, I program them. We meet, we talk. They become part of my body. You see, a reflector is in touch with the gods. I mean, they are. I mean, this is what it is. And for them, the moon is where they bow down. Because it's everything. I mean, it's everything. Something interesting to think about mystically. Many of you know that according to the cosmology that I was given, that we are coming to the yang. That the yang of the four variations, yang, yang, yin, yang, yang, yin, 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 that the yang, yang is to be eliminated. I was told that all of this is one living thing. I was also told that it's female. Oh, yin. Female is not really the right word for that. See, in the tradition, the moon is the eldest daughter. She is the delight of the father and the horror of the mother. The reflector serves the child. It serves the totality. It serves this great force. I mean, it is the force that I serve. That is, I serve the mother. I serve the yin. I serve form principle. But the future is not the mother's future. It's the eldest daughter's future. She is the one that is going to inherit the kingdom. It's why I so love solar eclipses, when the moon steps in front of the sun and you can see the future. Eh? Whenever there's a solar eclipse, I see the future. And reflectors, this is their holy task. It is to awaken to their service. It's this unique service. It is a service to the totality. And remember something about the nature of the totality. Homogenization is not something that will ever be destroyed. It will never be replaced. But within all of this, there is room for those who are ready, always. And without reflectors, the most difficult ones to find will never be found. They just won't. And so every time you have a chance to do a reading for someone who is a reflector, to know a parent that has a reflector child, do whatever you can to make sure that they understand. So that that child has a shot, of being able to be of service to those who are ready to awaken. It is something very, very important. And it's also something to recognize in the reflectors around you. It's time to tell them the truth. I know that now. It's time to tell them that their not self role is not truly what they are here for. And nor is that to the betterment of humanity. It is not. I don't think it's going to make it that much easier, quite frankly. But I think that for certain reflectors, to understand that will open up the possibility of being able to change their lives. I'd like to see a few more on the team. It would be a good thing.